The Japanese have long described their country as the land of the rising sun. According to legend, Izanagi had a daughter named Amaterasu. She is known as the sun goddess. At one point, Amaterasu went into a cave, closed the entrance with a boulder, and refused to come out. The world plunged into darkness. The other gods eventually tricked her to coming out, bringing back light and hope to the Japanese people. Japan is nearly 380,000 square kilometers, which is about 60% of the size of Alberta. However, its population is much larger, with an estimated 12 million just in the year 1600. The majority of the land is covered in forested mountains and steep valleys, leaving very little for agriculture or settlement of people. Despite these challenges, the beautiful landscape is a great source of pride for the Japanese people, and many celebrations, rituals, and ceremonies, just like the cherry blossom festivals, are linked to the changing seasons and an important part of Japanese life. However, nature has a dark side too. Japan is located in an area where several continental and oceanic plates meet. Minor earthquakes are common, and every few decades a major earthquake will strike Japan. These earthquakes cause devastating waves, known as tsunamis, and in certain areas of the nation are also hit by a type of tropical storm called a typhoon. Shinto is the ancient religion of Japan. The love of nature is the most important aspect of Shinto. It is based on the belief that sacred spirits called kami take the form of objects in nature such as mountains, trees, and stones. Human beings become kami when they die. Besides Shinto, many Japanese also follow the religions of Buddhism and Confucianism. Nature plays an important role in the culture of the Ainu people, Japan's indigenous group as well. The Ainu regard things like fire, water, wind, thunder, animals, and plants as gods, called kumui. The Ainu had their own separate society and territory, but eventually the Japanese began to take over the Ainu lands. The Japanese began a program of assimilation of the Ainu people. They were forbidden to speak their language or practice many of their customs, and were restricted to living in the areas the government provided for them. They were given land to farm, even though they were traditionally a hunting and fishing society. Even if it was forcefully, as was demonstrated by the history of the Ainu, the Japanese thought of themselves as a homogeneous society, with all citizens having similar values and beliefs. However, there was still a social hierarchy like the other societies we have studied this year. At the top of the hierarchy, the rulers or emperors were considered the descendants of the gods and the representatives of them on earth. The shogun was the military commander of the emperor's military forces. Therefore, he had the real power and control over everything. The daimyo were just below the shogun and owned the land. Like the knights of the European feudal system, Japanese samurai were the much respected warrior class. During the Edo period, the samurai lived in the castle towns controlled by the shogun or daimyo they served. Only the samurai were allowed to have swords. Farmers were considered important in Edo Japan because they produced the food that sustained the society. Laws controlled every aspect of a peasant's life. They were forbidden to smoke tobacco or to drink rice wine, and they needed special permission to travel outside of their district. The objects produced by the artisans included paper, porcelain, and clocks. Although artisans were extremely skilled, their status was lower than that of farmers. This was because they were not the primary producers. Their work required materials produced by others. A weaver, for example, relied on the silk, farmer for silk. Merchants bought things from artisans to trade or sell to others. Because rice was used as currency during most of this period, merchants performed a function similar to that of bankers as well. The value of land was determined by the amount of rice that it could produce, and a person's worth was determined by their rice production. Since they didn't actually produce anything, merchants were officially near the bottom of the social order. The class that women were born into determined their responsibilities as it did for men. For example, women born into the samurai class were expected to give their children a proper samurai upbringing. In the overall hierarchy of society, though, women were always considered lower than men. Women did not have legal existence, and they could not own property. Outcasts were people who were shunned or ignored by other classes because of their work. Usually they had occupations that in some way involved death. Leather tanners, butchers, and those who disposed of animal carcasses were all outcasts. Strict rules governed the behavior of each social class and kept what's called the social order. In general, it was believed that if everyone accepted the duties and responsibilities of their social class, there would be peace and order. If not, there would be chaos and suffering. So, to avoid this suffering, each person was considered responsible for the behavior of the others in the group. Everyone in the group could be punished if one person was disobedient. Therefore, everyone stayed in their social classes and remained obedient to the emperor and, in reality, to the shogun.